Today in the bunker, we're going to build the Plasticville Hobo Jungle suitable for the Wasteland. The Hobo Jungle is one of the few kits that I was willing to actually go ahead and buy outright. I haven't been able to find it used. I've been looking for years. I just haven't lucked into one, so that's fine. It's not a bad kit. I got this on sale, so I think I paid about $25 for it. It's got 3 buildings. And the thing about Bachmann kits, Plasticville, the green box is O scale, which is for 28. The blue boxes are HO scale, which are good for 20 millimeter, sometimes 15, so very versatile. And the back shows you some of the other kits that are available. We've built several of these here on the channel and or before we started doing videos, so got a bunch of those done. So when you open the box, everything just comes packed in a bag with some instructions. The instructions are just about a legal-sized piece of paper printed on both sides, and it does a pretty good job of showing you what goes what, where, with whom, all of that good stuff. These are the typical Plasticville, put the post in between the other posts, and it really only goes together one way. So, well, I guess if we count the outhouse, that's 4 buildings. So we're going to go ahead and get some of these glued together. And there's a little bag of bits, little chimneys, and like a rolled up curtain, some little awnings, a door. So that's kind of cool. One of the things you'll notice about these, this is probably the most post-apocalyptic kit that they've ever done. It's got basically nailed on, you could paint that as tin, you could paint it as tar paper, combination of both. Got some rocks and some bricks on there to hold the loose pieces down. Same thing on this other roof section. So some really, really good details. There's a license plate on that wall section there. So yeah, let's get some of these stuck together. It's got some fun little details. The outhouse goes together. It's a 2-holer. It's got places to sit. It's got doors marked his and hers. It's got a pretty nice roof. And this particular piece, I'm going to wait until I've painted this to put it together, so we'll see him again back at the end. Once again, I'll point out the method of construction for these is the peg goes between pegs. These are down to the point that you can't even put the walls on the wrong side. So you could convert it just by sawing those pegs off and moving the pieces around, but just basic assembly is pretty easy. Okay, and as usual, we're just going to use some Plastruct cement, but you could use any other kind of plastic cement or even super glue, whatever you've got, to glue these together. The biggest thing is just squaring them up. These kits lend themselves fairly well to that, although especially the older ones, sometimes the portions are warped, so you kind of have to do a little bit of judicious fitting at times. But all in all, an easy kit to put together. So we'll get that glued up. And the biggest thing is if you have a cutting mat like this, is just put it together, get a little bit of glue on there, kind of get that started, press it together tight, and then you can use the lines on the mat to help make sure you're at 90 degrees, and just hold it for a few seconds until it sorts of firm up. And then you can go back and lay a little more glue in there for that joint. And once that dries, it'll be pretty solid. Plus, we'll glue a little base on there for a floor. Some details like the doors, you can either glue in place or leave them free to flap around. Just no wrong way to do it there. One of these buildings, the door is actually like a rolled up piece of canvas and it's open. I'm going to go ahead and actually build a little door on there so that it can look like it's closed. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Because we didn't use the rolled up tarp, that left 2 holes, so I just took some modeling paste and put in there, but you could put Almost anything in the, whatever fits in there, you can glue it in place. Once we paint over it, I don't think you'll even notice. One thing I found on this particular one was that the holes for this piece were just a little bit too small. You could see from the top that they weren't quite all the way through. So I just took a hobby knife and cut around in there, and now it fits perfect. Some of the little plastic pieces in here do have some pretty severe mold lines. I'm going to guess partly because these molds are probably, 60 years old. Also, these are now produced overseas, so I don't know that the quality control is quite what it used to be. Although for these models, I don't know how much you really need. It takes almost no time to clean these lines up, but something to be aware of. All right, so those went together pretty straightforward, and they're pretty sturdy once you get them glued, and that glue sets up well. You get the glue on the seams. So we're going to go ahead and get these rattle can primed and set about putting some color on them. I primed these with black rattle can, and then just did a little bit of a zenithal with some gray, which probably I could have skipped on most of these because they're primarily aged wood. But that's okay. It's not a big deal. We'll work with it as it is. The tar paper parts kind of benefit from being a little darker to begin with. That makes them a little easier to work with. These roof panels are tin. We're going to base coat that with some very dark brown. All of the tin bits on this we'll do with dark brown, and then put some metallic on there. So we're going to go ahead and start dry brushing this up to make it look like aged wood. I'm just going to start with some light gray craft paint. Just use whatever, this is cool gray from the Martha Stewart "That's a Good Thing" line, but use whatever kind of light gray you have, or mix just a little bit of black into some white and just make it gray. That's fine. Okay, and we'll just dry brush over anywhere where it's fairly dark. And that actually matches up pretty well with the spray painted areas. And it'll give a nice variation in color, so which is important when you have buildings that are built entirely of just scrap bits. Okay, so just do that to taste on all of these with this light gray, and then we will do the same with some tan. All right, now that we've done all of that with the light gray, we'll come back with the tan and lightly add that, and that'll help make that wood grain pop a little bit more. And again, just do this to taste, just until you get the color of aged wood that you want. And if it gets a little bit streaky on this particular project, not quite as big a deal if you get a little too much paint on there, because we're going to add some chipped paint to portions of this, so you can easily cover that up, not a problem. So that really helps bring out that wood grain or any of the details that are in there. So now we're going to take some burnt umber and go around and cut in all of the pieces of tin that are on these various buildings. And this is another place where neatness counts. So I just take a smaller brush and just kind of cut those in, and then we'll go back over those with gunmetal. And that'll help kind of bring out that rusty metal look. And again, that's all to taste. You can make these look as rusty or as fresh as you want. The roof section of the largest building is textured very nicely. If you paint that black and then very carefully dry brush that gray, it's pretty much done at that point. I'm going to add some dirt and try to accentuate the lines where the paper pieces end. And we may try to go back out and pick out some of the nails, although they're kind of tiny. So we may just leave them as is. When you get done with all your dry brushing, if it seems like maybe the wood grain is not popping the way you want to, go back and add a little bit of black wash on there. I did the same thing around all of the metal bits, and that kind of helps to accentuate them. So again, this is all to taste. If you start with dead black and then just dry brush your way up, probably you wouldn't have to do that. But just give it a shot, experiment with it. There's more than enough wood on here to try different techniques. And like I said too, if you do something and it doesn't really work, you can cover it up with some paint, and because we're going to give this some color on top of this, and it'll hide a multitude of sins. This particular building has a foundation of railroad ties, so I just mixed some of this burnt umber half and half with some black, and I'm just going to apply a coat of that, and then I'll go back and dry brush that, probably with that tan color, just to pick it out a little bit. Once you've got all of your metal base coated with that burnt umber and then dry brushed with gunmetal, you can go back and add some areas of lighter rust, which we'll do as we pick out details. We're going to start adding some color to some of these boards. One of these windows, I've added some window screen, just glued that in place from the back, and just painted that metallic and some rust, and we'll start to add some more color to these other boards. Nice things about doing rust with a sponge is that it gives it a little bit of a texture and just kind of flattens it out a little bit as far as the light hitting it, and gives it a much more realistic rust appearance. And once you've sponged it on, if it's a little heavy, just take a clean portion of your sponge and just kind of dab at it, and that'll kind of knock it back a little bit and sort of blend it in, and then you can add more if you need to and knock it back. As a final step, once I've picked out all of the details and put on some little wash and dry brushing, I'll go back and take some clear plastic packaging and add some windows, and that really just adds so much to the model, and it's so easy to do. I just use clear plastic packaging and just put that in there with some white glue, some PVA white glue, and just let that dry. And if it gets up on the window, that's fine, it dries clear. For these builds, when I go ahead and varnish these with matte varnish, I do it after I put the windows in. If you didn't want the windows to look filthy, then put those in last after you do all the varnishing. Alright guys, so there's the Hobo Jungle kit as it comes from Plasticville with a few minor modifications. As you can see, this is indeed the most post-apocalyptic kit right out of the box that they've ever made. I really like it. It's a kit I've been looking for years, so like I said at the beginning, I went ahead and just bought one. If you can find this, it is well worth having, in my opinion. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it inspires you to make something awesome, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day.